The Rams are telling us they're interested in signing an elite wide receiver. Who could they sign? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do us a huge favor and subscribe to the Locked On Rams YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button, and drop all your takes down below. Do you want to see the Rams go after a premium wide receiver? Could Russell Wilson ever end up on the Rams? Let us know down below. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. We cover LA sports for over a decade, SI 24/7, Dodgers Nation. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre-half and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He just finished his 8th season covering your Los Angeles Rams, the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him on the X at Travis Rogers. And on today's episode, the Rams have shown interest in a premier wide receiver. Will they go out there and sign one of the available guys this offseason? We'll talk a little bit about last year's game against the 49ers in week 2. What did we learn from that? We're also going to talk about the big story in the NFL. Russell Wilson is out in Denver. But first, this episode of Locked On Rams is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Now, Travis, some big news in the NFL. Broncos cutting Russell Wilson, an $85 million disaster. Right. And see some people in the comments. Can he end up with the Rams as a backup quarterback? I think it's highly unlikely, but just before we get into that, can you believe this disaster for him? I mean, Russ he's not cooking. He looks like he is cooked.
Well, yeah. Look, Russell Wilson is one of my least favorite players in the history of this league. Russell Wilson is a fraud. Russell Wilson is a guy that was completely propped up by everything around him. And the second that he decided that he needed to be the reason that everything went, the whole thing caved in on itself. The Seahawks stopped winning. The Broncos stopped winning. That he got exposed for what he was. And look, we'll see what happens over the next couple of days. But think about when he left Seattle. Was there a line of teammates saying, oh, no, please don't leave? No. Is there a line of teammates in Denver saying, what are we doing? This is our guy? No. That this was something that he was covered and propped up. And yes, he has some ability and all of these other things, but this was inevitable. This felt like that once the Emperor's new clothes were finally seen, that this is going to be what it was, and that it's an $84 million cap hit in the process. Look, I don't like watching anybody lose their gig or anything like that, but that Russell Wilson wore out his welcome very quickly in his new place is not a huge surprise to me.
Yeah, anytime teams are willing to pay that much money to see you go away, it kind of tells you everything you need to know about how that team feels about you. And for me, look, kind of my memory between Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos with the Rams is that Nickelodeon game where he threw the pick to Bobby Wagner and Patrick was doing the broadcast from SpongeBob and Patrick was like, that's not what he wanted to cook. You know, he's just trolling Russell Wilson. I think that was kind of one of my favorite moments right there. And yeah, I mean, good luck selling that 18-bathroom house there in Denver. So, yeah, I think for me, can he be a backup quarterback? I still think, look, we can say everything we want about Russell Wilson, right? But he probably is going to get a job because of the lack of quarterbacks in the NFL. I think you look at teams like The Atlanta Falcons, I think, will end up with either Fields, with either Mayfield, with either Cousins. But the Steelers is an option. He kind of looks and feels and kind of smells like a Raider right now, even though Pierce has talked about going with Jaden Daniels, got the ASU connection there. I mean, there's teams out there. The Patriots, I mean, he already won a Super Bowl for the Patriots a couple years ago, so maybe he goes to New England. So I definitely think he does get a job as a starter, considering he could just take the league minimum, right? And go there on a one-year deal, try to rebuild his stock. But I will say the Rams are an extremely opportunistic organization. If he were to fall into their lap because he doesn't like the opportunities out there, who knows? It's not impossible.
Okay. So Russell Wilson has some ability. There's no two ways. He has some ability, and I agree with you. I think that he will get a starting job because there are a number of vacancies, and he's probably better than some of the other options that are out there. And if you can get him at a price, why not? I get that. As far as his ability his willingness, I guess is a better way of putting it, to be a backup, I'm highly skeptical. Russell Wilson has a very healthy ego, and I guess he should, because he has won a Super Bowl. He has been to another. He has been a good player in this league before. But this, shucks, golly gee willikers, I don't know, guy, I just don't buy it, because like you said, the Broncos basically said, we're willing to just take it in the neck for who knows how long. Just get him out. That there are very few teammates that are sad to see him go. There was always rumors about the time in Seattle and little smoke about how the defense in particular felt like he was being coddled and wasn't, doing what he needed to do to carry up his end of the bargain. And all of this, to me, adds up to bad teammate. The Rams don't do that. The Rams don't have guys that are selfish, that are bad teammates, that at least are drawing attention to themselves. The invisible high fives are running out of the tunnel. The invisible, like the whole thing. It is just the antithesis of what the Rams are. The Rams are our team. We, not me. All of these things. Russell Wilson would not agree to a backup, I think, in any circumstance. I just don't think that his ego would allow that to happen. And the Rams don't bring in bad teammates. And that's what I believe that he is.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm not saying that it's going to happen or anything like that, but I do think that, look, some people were saying that about Carson Wentz, and some people had issues with Baker Mayfield when they claimed him off the waiver. So they've taken this brand name quarterback.
I think the big difference between those two guys and Wilson, those two guys had, for lack of a better phrase, been humbled a little bit. They'd gone through it. Cleveland said, beat it, right? Carolina said, beat it. So Mayfield came in and it was like, look, I have to make this work or I might be out of the league. You can make a similar argument with Carson Wentz that after Philadelphia wasn't happy and Indy wasn't happy and Washington wasn't happy, and he was on the street for a long time and no one was really dying to bring him in, he'd been humbled a little bit and they were willing to do it. I don't think Russell, and first of all, Russell Wilson's a Super Bowl winning quarterback, so he's in a different category of those two guys. I just don't think he's been humbled like that. And I don't think that the Rams, even if he's just not that guy, he's just not a guy that you want in your building. I don't think. We've just seen so many instances of this being like, okay, this isn't at all what we thought it is. Let's move on. Let's move on quickly.
Yeah, also, too, he's not like he's that young, too. I mean, he's 35. No. Mayfield and Wentz, they were younger, right? They had a little more time to rebuild their careers. And, yeah, I just think going from Mr. Unlimited to Mr. Unemployed, it's going to be tough for him to accept that and just take a back seat. Do think it's an opportunity, but I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be with the Rams unless there's a lot of things that have to go wrong for other teams, and he has to really fall into their lap and just kind of come crawling looking for an offer. But I do think the Rams, they don't want to overpay for that position. They definitely have been a little stingy at the back.
Somebody's going to give him a starting job. He's going to start. He's going to start.
The Raiders.
The Raiders are a possibility. Pittsburgh seems like a landing spot. Minnesota's potentially a landing spot. Atlanta's potentially a landing spot. A lot of this has to do with where Kirk Cousins ultimately lands. He's going to get, obviously, a starting job somewhere in this league. But I do not think Russell Wilson will have a baseball hat on to start the season. He's going to have a helmet on.
I agree. But coming up next, we're talking about the Rams receiver spot. Are the Rams looking at adding an elite receiver in free agency this offseason? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
This episode of Locked On Rams is sponsored by BetterHelp. So an extra hour in your day, right? Just, you know what? Magically snap your fingers. You had an extra hour in your day. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it, right? A lot of us are thinking about, if I only had more time, I would do this. I'd go for a run. I'd take a nap. I'd read a book. I'd hang out with my friends a little more. Therapy, they can help you figure out exactly what it is that matters to you so you can do more of it. This is where BetterHelp comes in, right? So if you've been thinking about starting therapy, this is a great reason to try and give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. It's designed to be flexible. It's designed to be suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire. You will get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you don't connect with that therapist, you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So you're always going to be able to find somebody that connects with you. So learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon. Visit today and get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, a special shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching and listening to every single Locked On Rams episode. And you can join the club. Membership is free, and you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. Now, Travis, here in our second segment, we're going to pick up on a topic we touched briefly on yesterday, and that is that the Rams showed interest in wide receiver Mike Evans before he re-signed with the Bucs on a $52 million deal with $35 million in guarantees. Diana Rossini of The Athletic, she reported that the Titans, Rams, Chiefs, Patriots, Giants, Panthers, Falcons, and Jaguars were also in it. So they're one of several teams. But I think the big takeaway here is that the Rams, I think they want a different profile of receiver to really complete this wide receiver room. And then I think the signing of Demarcus Robinson was more of a WR4 and a depth piece. So I think that's something to consider this offseason. We talked about Rome Odunze of Washington. Do they trade up to go get him? Also, we're going to talk about, could they possibly be interested in signing a Calvin Ridley or a Michael Pittman? But I think it's evident at this point that they're still looking to improve that position group.
The Rams do the thing that I think is so incredibly smart. They leave all of their options open. They meet with all of the good players. They talk about all the possibilities that are available to them. They never do that thing where, okay, we've got that covered, on to the next thing. There are some positions where if you got a quarterback, you're not looking for your next quarterback, right? They have Matthew Stafford. You're not necessarily looking for that. You've got an Aaron Donald. You're not looking to replace him at this point. But really beyond those two guys and the head coach, they're always looking for, hey, is that guy better than the guy we got? Can we get him at a price? Can we play them together? Can we do this to where it's going to fit right now? And not that you pull the trigger on all these guys, but walk down the road, see what it looks like, see if you can get it done, see if it fits in, see if they're, maybe that player is interested in you the way that you're interested in them. I love that they keep their options open, A. And then number two, I think what is interesting is they're very clearly back in that let's go for it mode. Let's try to get something done right now. This is last year, very clearly, for lack of a better explanation, it was a developmental year, right? It was a year of, we're going to draft a bunch of guys. Let's see who can play. Well, it turns out a lot of them can play. Now, all of a sudden, they've gone from a developmental situation to hey, we're a lot closer, a lot sooner than maybe we had planned initially. Now, maybe that wide receiver can put you over the top. Maybe that draft pick that we were thinking about, maybe more of a developmental piece, we can flip it for a proven NFL player. They're right back in that mode where let's be good now, and then we'll worry about later.
Exactly, Travis. If anything, that's a full indication of that. We know that Les Snead, when he thinks he's going to win 10-plus games, he knows that first-round pick isn't going to be extremely high. Look at the Jalen Ramsey deal. You trade 2 firsts, you end up on top of that. If you look at some of these other moves they made to try to be opportunistic, they do that when they know they're going to have a good season where they're contending. And I think that's why you could see them move up. I don't think that they're going to be picking at 19 at this point. You trade down, you trade up, you trade for an established veteran. But as far as the wide receiver room goes, look, Puka and Cooper Kupp, they do a lot of things that are almost very similar, right? They're both 6'2". Yes. They're both physical guys. They're both great blockers. They're not burners necessarily, right? You look at someone like a Calvin Ridley, he's not extremely tall or anything. He's like 6'1", but it provides a different dynamic. You look at someone like a Michael Pittman, local guy, went to Oaks Christian High School, same high school as Zach Charbonnet from UCLA. So, I mean, you look at Michael Pittman, USC kid, right? he big, 6'4", physical, productive. He's at least 88 catches, 925 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns last 3 seasons. He's someone that's been consistent. He can win at the catch point. He can run after the catch a little bit, win at the line of scrimmage, to give you a boost in the red zone. He's someone that if you're willing to pay up big, around $60 to $70 million, $22 million a year, he could be had. I'm not so sure I'm in love with the idea of Michael Pittman, though.
I think if you're going to go get another guy, it needs to be a guy that's very different from what you already have. And I'm not so sure that Pittman is a lot different from what they already have. Slightly different, sure. But like all the traits that you just mentioned, Doug, for Kupp and Nacua are similar to what we're talking about with Pittman. If you're talking about doing something different, it's more of like that Mike Evans that we're talking about, right? Big, powerful, just a different type of wide receiver. Maybe somebody that can just absolutely burn in a way that Nacua and Kupp don't, the way that Tutu Atwell does, but hasn't been effective. I think you're looking for a different flavor of ice cream, right? You're not going from chocolate to rocky road. You're going from chocolate to rainbow sherbet, right? You're trying something totally different along the way. That they're looking is exciting because I think it's indicative of where they believe they are in this window being open. Michael Pittman doesn't really fill me with a great deal of enthusiasm, but like I've said a bunch of times before, if the Rams like it, I love it because they haven't missed on very many of these.
Yeah, for sure. And you look back a couple years ago, the Allen Robinson situation, how that was a big buzz. I'm a little gun shy, a little shell shocked from that. But I mean, look, Pittman, if they wanted to really go big, I mean, this is someone who's been extremely productive. I mean, 109 catches, so 5th most in the NFL last season. You got someone that can just run those deep digs and comebacks and, like I said, give you a big body on the outside. And I think that really is the biggest indicator of this. I don't think they're going to go and spend big on a Pittman, but I do think they're going to explore the possibility of getting another big-framed wide receiver to kind of round out this group. So I think that, like you said, the biggest takeaway here, though, is they got money to spend. How they going to spend it? They have assets to use. How they going to use them? I think Kevin Dotson still remains really one of my top priorities in solidifying the offensive line.
I think he's the top priority. I really do. I'm sure, look, if something extraordinary shook loose and you think you can get it, sure, go try to get it done. But Kevin Dotson really solidified what they were doing up front. I know he's expensive. I know it's a guard. It's more like eating your vegetables than getting something super exciting, but it's important that you do it. I hope that Kevin Dotson is a member of this team, and I hope they pay to keep him here. And I'm cautiously optimistic that they will.
I absolutely do too. But like I said, they want versatility. They want a larger framed wide receiver. That's kind of what they're telling us with the Mike Evans interest. So just keep your eyes on some of these big free agents and kind of this wide receiver market. And also, I think too, we'll kind of wrap this up. It's a very deep wide receiver draft. They're going to draft a wide receiver. Just depends on how high they're going to pick him. But now it's kind of like focusing on some of these bigger guys. Odunze, 6'3". So, yeah, Rams, they're cooking this offseason. Russell Wilson, he's not. But coming up next.
And I would love to see them draft some more wide receivers. But keep in mind, they've had a great deal of success picking outside of the top guys, right? That Puka, we've talked about it a million times, 5th round. Cooper Kupp, 3rd round. That they're pretty good at saying that guy right there that we can wait on just a little bit and get him. That's something that they've been good on. You don't have to look, if you can get your hands on an Odunze or a guy like that, then sure, go do it. But if you can't and you got to wait till later on, I have faith that they'll find a guy that can help their team.
They absolutely can, but I also think they're considering the age of Matthew Stafford, and they kind of want to get him a nice brand new fancy toy to just really take this offense over the top. You got Kyren, you got Puka, you got Kupp, you got a lot of weapons, but one more premier wide receiver along with the solidified offensive line, you're looking at a top 5 offense in the NFL, in my opinion. But coming up next, we're going to continue our season in review series. We're going to talk about the San Francisco 49ers game in week 2. What do we learn from that? That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams.
Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Not number 2, not number 12, number 1, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers, this is for you. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Think about how much fun you could have with those $150 in bonus bets. You could be betting on all of your favorite NBA players and teams, with quick bets. There are live same-game parlays. There are exclusive props. There's a whole bunch more as well. But you got to put that FanDuel app on your phone, and you got to place that $5 bet to get your $150 in bonus bets if it wins. For instance, you could have got a little action on the Lakers last night. They actually managed to find a way to beat a pretty good team. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON/LockedOn and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thanks for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, Travis, we're going to continue our quick review of the 2023 season, starting with the Rams' Week 2 loss to the San Francisco 49ers, 30-23 at home. It was their 9th straight loss to San Francisco. My biggest takeaway in this one was this is kind of where we started to see this Rams team play some quality football early on, but also not be able to sustain that for 4 quarters. I mean, they put up 17 points in their first 3 drives of the game, and then they were in their final 6 possessions, they had 3 points. So really, they faded down the stretch. A ball came out of Kyren Williams' hands on a pass, ended up as an interception. I mean, there was Lenore, the route with Van Jefferson. I mean, there were some things in this game. You're like, okay, they're not that far away from the 49ers, but at that point, I felt like, okay, you could see the talent gap.
So the 49er game was an interesting one for me, and I understand that I kind of went back and forth a handful of different times with this team during the season. But even though they lost to San Francisco, at the end of that day, I said it on my radio show, and everybody gave me a ton of you-know-what, and they played it back, and they played it back, and they played it back, and ultimately they kept playing it back, and I was right anyway. Even after they lost that game, I said, this Rams team, they're going to go to the playoffs. I said that on the radio show at the time because they played the best team in the league, or at least the team that we thought might be one of the best teams in the league. They played them straight up for a half. They came completely unglued in the second half. They blew it towards the end of the first half. Remember, they went down, they scored points. You're like, all right, they're going to go in, they're going to have a lead, they're going to get the ball to start the second half. And then San Francisco drove the length of the field, punched in a touchdown with like a kind of a walk-off, first half walk-off touchdown along the way. And all of that positive vibes just poof. But they were toe-to-toe with the Niners for 30 minutes of football. It was incredibly encouraging after seeing what we saw in Seattle, seeing them go and play San Francisco the way that they did, looking at Matthew Stafford and saying, okay, that looks pretty darn good. Puka had another pretty nice game along the way. You're talking yourself into that, okay, Cooper Kupp is going to come back at some point, that this team is actually going to get better. If this is what they are early, what'll it look like late? It was a very encouraging moment, even though they ended up losing the game and did not look particularly good in the second half.
Yeah, absolutely. They still had a chance to win it. I mean, they're on 27-20 towards the end of the fourth quarter, 3rd and 5, and you have Stafford targeting Jefferson, doesn't come in to make the grab, doesn't try to do a better job coming back to the ball, and Lenore gets that interception, pretty much wraps things up. So kind of my big takeaway for that game, too, was it was really the beginning of the end for Van Jefferson. Had one of his worst games as a pro. Had 1 pass for 9 yards. He dropped a throw over the middle on a 3rd down, and he obviously was targeted on that one play that led to the interception. But, yeah, that was the big takeaway, too, was that the talent gap wasn't too significant to the point where, like, okay, we can start to be optimistic about this season. Stafford looked good. Puka Nacua caught 15 passes on 20 targets, 147 yards. He's the first player in NFL history with 10 catches and 100 yards in his first 2 career games. So the Puka mania was on. Byron Young really had his first breakout game as a rookie. So, yeah, I'm with you. It definitely was painful because it was your 9th straight loss to the San Francisco 49ers. But I think we were both optimistic after that game, saying, look, you beat the Seahawks in week 1, a team that was expected to contend for the division. And then 2, you really hung with the San Francisco 49ers. If it wasn't for that penalty late by Darian Kendrick on Deebo Samuel, you're feeling a lot better heading into the half, and maybe you could steal that victory at home.
Yeah, I love what you said about Puka, too, that was the day where everybody went running to their fantasy waiver wires to see if Puka was still available, because it went from, all right, it didn't happen once, it happened twice. There's still 15 games left in the season. Let me see if I can get Puka on my squad. Everything you said, Doug, I agree with. I think it was kind of this was the last time you felt really good about this team until you felt really good about them much later in the season, because this was kind of, okay, they're 1-1. They got Philadelphia, I think, or maybe it was Indy 3-4. I forget which order they came in, but you knew that the schedule was going to be particularly tough through the first part of the season. They hung with the 49ers. It was another disappointing loss because they seemingly always lose to the 49ers. But there was some optimism after the Rams won that game that I really don't think resurfaced until about week 13 or 14. But in week 2, it was definitely there.
There was. I think my biggest takeaway, too, was, look, CMC, he did his thing on the ground, 159 yards, and kind of the run defense moving forward. It kind of made you think like, okay, this defense, you just got to keep them in games. The offense, they're going to perform. But really, all in all, definitely another painful loss of 49ers. But guess what? That would be the last 49ers loss of the season. Things would change in week 18. We'll get there later in this review. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And you can follow the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, on X at Travis Rogers. Until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.